Do you know Singapore is looking at using
nuclear electric power.
Let's take a look at what Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said about it earlier this year.
We will therefore study the potential deployment of nuclear energy in Singapore.
You might be wondering, how safe is it for a city-state like Singapore to have a nuclear power plant? How ready are we to build one? And how long will it take? We spoke to two energy experts, and here's what they said when I first asked them, how safe is nuclear energy? It's been more than a decade since an earthquake struck Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant in 2011, and countries like Singapore shelved plans to build such plants, citing safety risks and not having the right technology back then. So what changed? And is nuclear energy really safe?
In general, nuclear energy is very safe. In fact, it is, to many disbelief, nuclear energy is probably one of the safest energy that we can harness.
Nuclear energy, right, has a controversial reputation, right, primarily due to high-profile past incidents, which are very few, to be honest. These incidents have contributed to the perception of nuclear power as risky, despite advancement in safety measure and technology.
Safety is not just all about engineering. It's not all about technology. It is also the human factor that's the most important. And the past accidents, unfortunately, are mostly due to human error, especially Fukushima.
While we're on the topic of nuclear safety, we can't avoid talking about nuclear waste. So how will it be managed?
Same with waste or spent fuel, right? These are the most radioactive or highly radioactive waste that we're dealing with. The people generally portray that there's mountains and mountains of nuclear spent fuel and nuclear waste that is piling up and there's no way to store it. But then again, in reality, if you have really been to a spent fuel facility, you'll be surprised to find there's only several canisters and maybe a few storage tanks that's there storing the spent fuel. And they're all stored in a huge empty room. So that is the kind of quantity we're talking about. In Singapore, do we have a place? Some people refer to the Jurong Rock Haven maybe as one of the potential place to store radioactive waste, but it is still a decision that needs to be made.
But wait, doesn't Singapore already have renewable sources of energy? Well, as part of its energy mix, natural gas fuels around 94% of Singapore's electricity generation. Municipal waste, biomass, and solar energy fuels close to 5%. And less than 2% are by coal and petroleum products. Those numbers you just saw are from the Energy Market Authority, Singapore's energy industry regulator and developer. So, should Singapore go nuclear? And how does nuclear compare to renewables?
Nuclear has an extreme high energy density and relatively small physical footprint. Solar and wind require significant more land to produce the same amount of energy.
The difference is by thousands, hundreds of thousands times difference, meaning that to match the scale of a 1 gigawatt nuclear power plant, you may have to cover most part of Singapore with solar panel to match the amount of electricity produced. So the major difference between nuclear and solar is that nuclear energy is a 24/7 carbon-free energy. It is a controlled energy which can be controlled by human. We can control how much we want it, how much it will produce. Whereas solar energy really depends on the mood of the sun.
But what about the costs involved? And will it reduce how much we are paying for electricity?
When we are ready, when we have the first plant, what we should be able to expect is the cost of electricity should be reduced. If we are able to deliver the project on time, on budget, we will also be able to lower our overall electricity cost.
When talking about nuclear energy, we tend to picture large columns with plumes of white smoke rising. In PM Wong's speech, he spoke about small modular reactors. Just what are they and how do they compare to regular reactors?
It's actually an evolution of nuclear reactors designed to be smaller, more flexible, and potentially safer than traditional large-scale reactors. The size is typically about 350 to 300 megawatt electricity. However, what distinguishes SMR is really its modular feature, which means that they can be fabricated in factories, right? And then just deliver for site for installation and commissioning, really reducing construction costs and time. It occupies a smaller physical land space.
We call them light water reactors, right? LWRs. You have one of those on Jurong Island. And chances are the entire Jurong Island will become a nuclear power plant. But with the new technology, we may be able to place these nuclear power plant or reactors right next to, for example, a petrochemical plant or next to a refinery, where we can use the energy directly from the reactor to power our economy, and there is no carbon emission from it.
SMRs are smaller than older nuclear models. Does that mean the risks they carry are also smaller?
So in terms of mitigation in the event of an accident, SMR will be a lot easier. There's also less decay heat that we're dealing with. Decay heat means once you shut down the reactor, it doesn't mean that you just shut it down like coal-fired power plant. There is still nuclear reaction going on, meaning there will be accumulation of heat. So even though the reactor is small, we are still building a fairly large containment. So in the event there's an accident or there's a loss of power in the station, there's enough natural convection within the containment to make sure the SMR or the reactor is properly cooled.
Okay, assuming Singapore does go ahead with adopting nuclear energy, how ready is the country?
We do have a strong foundation to grow the necessary expertise through education training. And importantly, I think I see international collaboration with countries and organizations that have established nuclear programs will be critical for us. So with the change in perception around nuclear, nuclear will be a sector where Singapore can build on and train talents around it and really create a viable sector that's not only beneficial for Singapore, but also beneficial for the region.
Starting with maybe a nuclear education program, so a bachelor degree in nuclear engineering, that could be a starting point. We must also train qualified engineers. And that is a challenge because we don't have any operating nuclear power plant in Singapore or in the region. If you look at what our neighbors are doing, they have been sending their engineers, scientists, to work on overseas nuclear power plant. Right? I mean, Russia, in US, in China, to acquire the first-hand knowledge about how do you deal with the various situations and how do you actually operate a nuclear power plant. We need to do the same.
So, should Singapore decide to add nuclear to its mix of energy sources, how long will it be before the country sees its first nuclear reactor?
That takes a long period of time. There we're talking about easily 10, 15, maybe 20 years. In order for Singapore to be confident to say, now we have a qualified pool of talents. Today we are 2025. 15 years is 2040, right? And let's say at that time we are also split second we are ready to make a decision. We still need to approve the site, licensing, selecting vendors, selecting supply chain. Maybe it takes another 5 years for that. Now, if we think about back in the Energy Committee 2050 report, we want nuclear energy by 2050, possibly, right? 10%. But if you're looking at this timeline, that's way beyond 2050. It means that even if you're making a decision today, it is still that solid 30, 40 years time span before we can actually see a nuclear power plant in Singapore. If nuclear energy really is the necessity back then, we are running out of time.